Okay, I'll get started then. All right, kalispera everyone, good evening. I'm Dina Skias, the Director of Student Affairs and the Odyssey in Athens Study Abroad program here at Webster Athens. And I want to welcome you to our first virtual lecture. These virtual lecture series came about as kind of a celebration and dedication to the, in honor of the Greece's bicentennial, of the 200-year anniversary of Greece's bicentennial. So throughout the year, we have various virtual lectures that will take place, highlighting different themes of Greece's modern history. You're welcome to join any of them with us. So please follow our social media pages. We'll be posting on there when the different virtual lectures will take place and what the theme will be. Would love to have you join us with them. So without further ado, let me just turn it over now to Dr. Michalidis, the Vice Rector for Academic Affairs at Webster Athens, who will be introducing our guest speaker. Okay, I'll turn it over to you, Susie.
Thank you very much. It's very nice, as I mentioned before, to see our old friends, some people who are joining us now. And well, I hope that everything, Barbara always is with us. Yes, nice to see you. And the former students who were here and rejoining us. Well, here I see, I think my niece, Ekaterina from the United Nations organizations, well, so where she is working. And let me introduce Dr. Sfekas. Some of you already had the experience with Dr. Sfekas as a student. We have him as our colleague. And I think it is the best thing to have intellectuality on the campus. And this is what we can see in Dr. Sfekas. With Dr. Sfekas, we went through so many interesting different things which we were creating. We were organizing also wonderful conferences, lectures, and always, as soon as you ask Stan if you would like to participate in different activity, immediately you see Stan is ready. And I think it's such a beneficial thing for the students at Webster Athens to have the professor with his background. First of all, he has his degrees in philosophy and English. Then he also had his studies in philosophy, and not just the philosophy, tra-la-la, but very serious philosophy. Am I right, Stan? So he went to the best universities in the United States. He studied in Maryland, and he also was in New York University. And while we were lucky that he joined us in our previous university of Indianapolis, and now he's again with us. My advice to the students, well, is always, if you will just see the Dr. Sfekas teaching something, because somehow we don't have so many classes as we had before with him, but don't hesitate, register for this. It might seem that it is very difficult, you cannot understand that it is on the high level, but all of you should enjoy these high levels of intellectuality. And it's very important for the students especially to know at least some elements of philosophy, even if it seems sometimes boring, maybe it seems sometimes difficult. Well, digest this and go and ask, and Dr. Sfekas would be always happy to help you this. Well, to have intellectual people around us, it's not an easy thing. Today in the class which we had with some of the students who are present now, we discussed this. It gives you a lot of very, very valuable things in your life. Well, you can escape stupidity, I'm sorry to say, and not to have, well, but on the other hand, you are benefiting from this. It's the best gift which Webster Athens can offer the students with Dr. Sfekas lectures. And of course, some of our colleagues who are always trying to do their best to give you all the best educational experience. Dr. Sfekas, my friend, well, please talk to us about very interesting things. Thank you.
Okay,
Wow,
Stanley,
thank
I'm going
you.
to go ahead and share the screen for you.
Thank you for that lovely introduction, Susie. Now, because of the Independence Bicentennial, I decided that the lecture that I'm going to give you will talk about the birth of the modern Greek state. And what I want to, you'll see as we examine the PowerPoint, that what my approach is not about the military history and the strategy and the battles and so forth. This time I want to show you how ideas were behind it, and that the birth of the modern Greek state is the result of the Greek Enlightenment. Shall we enter it, Dina? Okay. That's a picture of Mahmud II, who was the Ottoman emperor at that time, between the years 1821 and 1832. I shall read the text to you now. The modern state of Greece came into existence as a result of a protracted, bloody war against the Ottoman Empire between the years 1821 and 1832. The significance of the Greek War of Independence transcends the bounds of Greece and Greek history. It was the first major successful war of independence by a subject population against an imperial power since the American Revolution of 1776. It was the first successful nationalist revolution, and it provided a model for later nationalist struggles. Okay, we'll change the page. The Greek society that developed from the 19th century onward was influenced in many ways by the yoke of foreign domination, by the experience of being incorporated into a vast multi-ethnic empire. The Ottoman State was a theocracy based on strict notions of hierarchy and order. At the pinnacle of society was the Sultan, a divine right absolute ruler. As the one selected by God to lead the chosen people, his authority was unquestionable, and so he was owed total obedience. In return, the Sultan safeguarded the religious and civil laws upon which social justice was founded. The people of the empire were divided by religion into two main groups: the Darul Islam, the domain of the faithful, i.e. Muslims, and the Darul Harb, the domain of war, the non-Muslims. A person's duties, obligations, and rights were integrally bound up with their position as a member of one of these two groups. A conversion to Islam was possible, but the conquering Ottomans did not demand it. Instead, further subdivisions, based once again on religion, were used to divide the subject populations into smaller and more easily governed groups. Next, okay. The non-Muslim members of the Darul Harb were subdivided into groups or millets on the basis of religious confession rather than ethnic origin. In addition to the Muslim millet, there were four others: the Jewish millet, the Gregorian Armenian millet, the Catholic millet, and the largest and most important of the non-Muslim groups, the Orthodox or millet-i-Rum, literally the Roman millet. The millet system developed over a long period of time and did not achieve its final form until the 19th century. Nonetheless, from early on in its development, Ottoman law accorded the millets a fair amount of autonomy. At the head of each millet was a millet bashi, a religious leader who was responsible for the care of the millet's members and for ensuring his flock's continued obedience to the Sultan. The head of the Orthodox millet was the ecumenical patriarch of Constantinople. He was also the ethnarch, or leader of the nation, and this gave him wide-ranging powers in secular as well as spiritual matters. Page. There we have a view of the Phanadion quarter. In the text, it'll be explained. But this just to say that that's where the patriarchate is, and this was the aristocratic Greek neighborhood during the Byzantine Empire, and continued to be an important neighborhood of the Greeks, of the upper class Greeks who were merchant class living during the 400 years during the Ottoman period. The non-Muslim population was discriminated against. There were special levies imposed only upon them, including a head tax and a minimum 10% tithe on agricultural produce. They were subject to corvée labor as well. That's forced labor. There were proscriptions on the type of attire they might wear. They could not bear arms, and they were prohibited from riding horses. In court, testimony of a Muslim would always be accepted over that of a non-Muslim. Marriages between Muslims and non-Muslims were illegal. Most hated of all was the forced conscription of non-Muslim male children for service in the military or in the civil service. This practice had been ended by the 18th century. Next, please. Greek armatolos in Greek, and they're called armatols in English. Maintaining order and control over such a vast domain required vast resources of manpower. Once the feudal system broke down, other means had to be found. A standing army would have been impossibly expensive to keep up. The solution arrived at was the appointment of non-Muslim men of violence as the guardians of specified areas. These armatolis were to be self-sustaining, as the armed guards would be paid through the collection of local taxes and transit duties. This was a system susceptible to flagrant abuse. Bandits or klefts flourished in many of the remote areas of the empire. Some were Christians who had committed crimes against state officials and so had to flee. Others were adventurers out to make money. Gangs of armed men formed, and depending on whether in the pay of the state or not, they could be considered brigands or armatols. For most of the peasant population, can you raise the page a little bit, please? Yes, for most of the peasant population, the difference was not too important. They suffered abuses from both groups. Later myth-making would turn the klefts into proto-revolutionaries, but to contemporaries, they were a force to be feared. Next slide, please. The nature of the Ottoman administration provided a space for another group of Greeks to rise in stature and power. During the 18th century, as the Ottoman Empire found its internal situation becoming threatened, a group of families known as the Planarians rose to positions of considerable power within the Ottoman administration. Most Planarians were Greek by birth. They were very well educated, multilingual, and wealthy. They began to fill key positions in the Ottoman administration, or the Porte, as it was often referred to. As chief interpreters to the Porte, the dragoman, they shared with the Ottoman foreign minister responsibility for the conduct of foreign policy. The name, the Turkish word, the dragoman, means translator or interpreter. And these are played a very important role because in translating for the Sultan, they wound up becoming the archdiplomat, the Secretary of State, as Americans would call it, or the Minister of Foreign Affairs. And they became political officials in the Porte, in the Ottoman administration, and like the right hand of the Sultan. And one of the reasons that no Muslim could fill this position is that in the Quran, the languages of the non-believers were cursed, so they didn't learn foreign languages. The role of dragomans in the Ottoman Empire. The plural of dragoman is not dragomen, because the original word was dragomanu, you see, and in Greek would be dragomanos, so it's dragomans to make it, you had an S to dragoman to make it the plural in the Ottoman Empire. As interpreters to the commander of the Ottoman fleet, they obtained considerable influence over the Greek islands of the Eastern Mediterranean. In the role of hospodars, or princes of the Danubian principalities of Moldavia and Wallachia, they became rulers in their own right, recreating in their courts in Jassy and Bucharest luxurious imitations of the imperial court in Istanbul. The Planarians became notorious for their corruption and intriguing. Some, however, did take the lead in promoting legal changes and land reform, and in promoting Greek education and culture. The Greek Planarians became a powerful and wealthy group, and they played an important role in the movement for Greek liberation. Greeks or Hellenized members drawn from other groups carved out a very important and lucrative niche for themselves as merchants. By the end of the 18th century, Greeks controlled much of the terrestrial and maritime commerce of the Ottoman Empire. The Greek merchant families established warehouses and shipping facilities in every major city and market town in the Balkan Peninsula. From this network of facilities, they controlled the overland trade in foodstuffs, textiles, industrial crops, and finished products. By 1800, Greek merchants from Chios, Smyrna, and Istanbul, among others, had established a near monopoly over the maritime commerce between the Levant, the Balkans, the Black Sea, and Western Europe. Related to the emerging Greek economic dominance of the maritime carriage trade, the export commodity production center and the brokerage trade was the establishment by Greek merchants of commercial houses abroad. Next, please. Diasporic Greeks had grown in affluence and prominence during the 18th century. And because of the greater freedoms accorded them and their exposure to intellectual currents in Western Europe, it is not surprising that the intellectual basis of Greek nationalism was most coherently formed among this group. The voluminous writings of these men constituted a Greek extension of the ideas and philosophies of the Enlightenment. Moreover, the Greek Enlightenment has left an indelible mark upon the full extent of Greece's development, upon both Greece's actual historical development and the history of the discourse on Greece's development. This intellectual movement had then a lasting impact on Greece. The Greek Enlightenment. Among the contributors to the Greek Enlightenment, two men in particular stand out. Adamantios Korais, 1748 to 1833, and Rigas Velestinlis, around 1757 to 1798. Rigas Velestinlis is also known as Riga Fereos, but historians insist that Fereos was not the accurate name. Might have been a nom de plume. I mean nom de guerre, the name he used for war or for writing military documents. Adamantios Korais was born in Smyrna to a Chioti father and a Smyrnioti mother. After receiving an eclectic and unconventional education, Korais was sent to Amsterdam to oversee his father's silk trading interests there. He was to remain abroad thereafter. From his home in Paris, Korais played a leading role in formulating the intellectual foundation of Greek nationalism. Repulsed by the violence he witnessed during the French Revolution, but steeped in hatred for the Ottoman Empire, he was thus torn by his firm beliefs that Greece must be freed from the yoke of tyranny, as he put it, but that it must not be by violent revolutionary means. Instead, he preached the middle way of emancipation through education. Keep in mind that this man was an eyewitness to the French Revolution. He was in Paris during the French Revolution, observed it and everything. And that meanwhile, he was one of Greece's top intellectuals. He's the father of puristic Greek, the Kafarevosa language, which is based on the Attic dialect, which he knew inside out from reading ancient Greek. He's one of the great scholars and linguists in the Greek language, you see. And that's why he wanted this sort of solution rather than blood and sword. Okay, next slide. Okay, continuing. Through his work in classical philology, Korais aimed at inculcating in Greeks a sense of their ancient heritage. His emphasis on the need to resurrect Greece's ancient glory stemmed in large part from his intense hatred of the Orthodox higher clergy, monkish barbarians, as he once called them, whom he blamed for the degraded state of the populace. For Korais, then, the model for a new Greece should be ancient Athens rather than medieval Byzantium. It was thus through his efforts as a linguist, and in particular his development of Kafarevosa, a purely literary language that combined elements of ancient Greek with the popular spoken language called Demotic Greek, that he intended to give Greeks a means to invigorate that heritage. Though he had much to say about the moral regeneration of the Greeks, he was strangely mute about the type of polity he foresaw rising from the ashes of the Ottoman Empire. Up a bit, Dina, please. Of course, it was to be liberal, but beyond that, he never addressed issues such as its size, composition, and the governmental system. He lived to see the creation of an independent Greek state, though he played no major active role in its creation, and in fact worried when hostilities broke out that the rebellion was premature. Next slide. Rigas Velestinlis. Rigas Velestinlis was more than anyone else was the father of the revolution. A Hellenized Vlach, Velestinlis had a checkered career. His most notable post was that of secretary to Alexander Ypsilantis, the dragoman of the Porte in Constantinople. Rigas spent much time in Wallachia in the service of Phanariot hospodars, these Phanariot princes. Highly educated and a gifted linguist, he was well suited to act as the conduit for the transmission of revolutionary ideas and ideals from the West to the East. Based in Vienna and imbued with the revolutionary fever emanating from France, he actively sought to spread the contagious creed of liberation to the Balkans. In a series of works, Rigas both spread the gospel of revolution and sketched out a vision for the new Balkan Republic that would emerge from the ashes of the Ottoman Empire. Next, please. Of course, it was to be liberal. Oh, somehow this repeats itself. Next slide, please. 15. Okay. That's it. In his book, The Rights of Man, he transferred some of the key aspects of the French Declaration of the Rights of Man, of man and the citizen, into a Balkan context. In Article 3, on the equality of all men before the law, for example, he explicitly stated that this included both Christians and Muslims. Other articles as well emphasized that these fundamental natural rights appertain to all groups and all religious dominations. He also called for the abolition of slavery and for the use of Greek as the common tongue of the new motherland. In the new political constitution of the inhabitants of Rumeli, Asia Minor, the archipelago, Moldavia, and Wallachia, he provided a more detailed blueprint for the new state's constitution. The new polity was to be a secular democratic republic. He referred to it as a Greek republic, but as he clearly noted, Greek in this context meant citizen, not ethnicity. The quote, "The Greek people consists of all those living in the empire, without distinction of religion or language." Article 2. He was even more explicit in Article 7. "The sovereign people consists of all inhabitants of this empire, without distinction of religion and speech. Greeks, Bulgarians, Albanians, Vlachs, Armenians, Turks, and every other kind of race." So you can see his philosophy. In sum, Rigas wanted a secular, multi-ethnic, liberal, democratic state that geographically resembled the Byzantine Empire. This was a noble vision that was not to be. Finally, he recognized that the people needed more than political ideals to be roused to action, and so he penned a revolutionary anthem, the Furios. This stirring poem became the Greek Marseillaise, and it was widely disseminated and sung. Quote, "Let us slay the wolves who impose the yoke, who cruelly oppress both Christians and Turks. Let the cross shine over land and sea. Let the foe kneel down in the face of justice. Let men be purged of all this sickness, and let us live on earth as brothers free. These are lines 121 to 126. Next, please. While attempting to spread the gospel of national revolution, Rigas was captured in Austrian-controlled Italy. He was transported to Vienna, where he was imprisoned. After intense lobbying by the Porte, he and 7 other Greek radicals were extradited to the empire. On the night of 24 June 1798, Rigas was executed by strangulation in a Belgrade prison. With the following words, Rigas became the first martyr to Greek independence. Quote, "This is how brave men die. I have sown a rich seed. Soon the hour will come when my nation will gather the ripe fruit." Next, please. Philiki eteria. If a revolution is to be successful, 3 conditions must be met. There must be an ideological framework which gives aims and a direction to the movement. There must be an organizational structure which can coordinate and lead the movement. And finally, there must be adverse material conditions among the populace which makes mass support for action possible. In the Balkans in 1821, all 3 of these conditions were met. The Greek Enlightenment provided the ideological framework. The Philiki coordinated and led the movement, and the enslavement imposed on the Roman, up a bit please, yes, the Roman Millet by Ottoman law provided the adverse conditions. This shows a swearing ceremony of the secret society, the Philiki, which I'll go into a bit now. The Philiki, or friendly society, some people translated society of friends, was the most important of the many clandestine revolutionary groups that had sprung up since the 1770s. Emmanuel Xanthos, Nikolaos Skoufas, and Athanasios Tsakalov, 3 merchants from different regions of the Ottoman Empire, founded the Philiki in 1814 in Odessa on the Black Sea. Xanthos was initially the driving force behind the organization. Though based in Odessa, he traveled widely in the Balkans because of his olive oil business. One of his trips took him to the island of Lefkada, one of the Ionian islands. The ideas of the French Revolution had taken root there during the period of French rule. Not only did Xanthos become stirred by the notions of liberty and freedom while staying on the island, but he was also introduced to the murky world of secret societies when he was enrolled in the island's Masonic lodge. Like many members of the diaspora communities, Xanthos believed that liberation for the Greeks would be achieved through the actions of the major Western European powers. The Concert of Europe, crafted by Clemens von Metternich at the Congress of Vienna, dashed any such hopes. The conservative crowned heads of Europe combined to maintain the status quo, and that policy extended even to relations with the Ottoman Empire. The Philiki was established when it became clear that if freedom was to be attained, the Greeks and the other Christians in the Balkans would have to do it themselves. Let me explain, make sure you understand this. the reaction to Napoleon after he had conquered all these countries and so on was a tremendous philosophical conservatism. And Metternich organized the Congress of Vienna in 1815, a year after the secret society was formed. And he got all of the major powers, all of them, Britain, France, Russia, and also the Ottomans, all to sign on to a contract that they would put down any revolutions. You see, it was very conservative and anti-revolutionary. So the strategy of all of these revolutionaries was that they could get these major powers to go against the Ottomans. And once he formed that organization, it became clear that's going to be very difficult. These major leaders have sworn not to do that, such a thing, but to put down revolutions. So it looks like the Greeks and other Christians are going to have to do it for themselves. Okay, next slide. If the Philikieteria was to have any chance of success, it would have to appeal to a wide spectrum of Balkan Christians and would have to recruit as members as many prominent men as possible. Accordingly, the Central Committee appointed 12 men, the apostles, and assigned them the task of recruiting as many leaders as possible in their assigned region. After this move, the organization's membership expanded rapidly both in size and in geographical scope. Influential men, both inside and outside of the Ottoman Empire, joined. Organizationally, the membership was divided into 4 hierarchically ordered civil ranks and 2 military ranks. The ranks were based on wealth and responsibilities. In order to maintain secrecy, only members from the highest ranks knew the identities of members from outside of their immediate cell. This compartmentalization meant that, unlike other such groups, the Philikieteria was able both to attract a substantial membership and to elude detection and suppression. It brought together men from many levels of society: merchants, professionals, large landowners, members of the clergy, clefs, bandits, and kapi, warlords, and even some prominent fanariots, like the former Russian general Alexander Ypsilantis, who eventually emerged as the group's paramount leader. Next, please. The Philikieteria grew to be the largest secret society, and it provided an organizational base for the dissemination of revolutionary ideas and for coordinated action. But there was a very significant downside to its large size. Along with size came diversity of aims, ambitions, and viewpoints. Ideologically, except for the goal of liberation from the Porte, little else connected the membership. Some prominent leaders envisioned a new Byzantine Empire based on a Greek theocratic monarchy. Others fervently wanted to create a multi-ethnic secular republic founded upon the principles of the French Revolution. These fissures would only emerge after the actual onset of hostilities. Initially, at least, because of its size and the number of important leaders whom it counted as members, the Philikieteria had emerged as a Balkan-wide revolutionary organization. By 1820, all of the pieces were in place for a Christian uprising in the Balkans. Only a spark was required to set ablaze the conflagration of war. The precipitating factor in the Greek War of Independence was the revolt of Ali Pasha of Ioannina against his master, Sultan Mahmud II. Next, please. It's Ali Pasha, but the Greek pronunciation is Ali Pasha, and he's famous in Greek for folklore with that name. So I'm sticking with the Greek name for now. Ali Pasha wanted to withstand the initial assault against him by the Ottoman forces. Then, depending on the outcome of the fighting, he could open negotiations with the Sultan, either as a submissive supplicant begging for forgiveness, or as a powerful leader who could restore peace in the Balkans on his terms. Okay, next slide. So he thought, resisting the Sultan pay off either way. The Heterist leadership, the Filikieteria leadership, sought to ride the coattails of Ali's war. Assuming that the bulk of the Ottoman forces would be arrayed against Yanina, the plans were to foment rebellions by Christians in 3 regions: the Danubian principalities of Moldavia and Wallachia, Constantinople, and the Peloponnese. Each strategy had its own rationale and its own set of problems. Next slide. Militarily, phase 1 of the rebellion saw the insurgency meet with success. During this period, the Greek forces were able to capture many of the major strongholds of the Peloponnesus and establish a strong presence in central Greece as well. Indeed, by December of 1823, they had conquered and controlled all of the major garrisons and towns in central and southern Greece. The Suliotes and others from western Greece had joined the movement, as had the great chieftain of central Greece, Odysseus Androutsos. Many of the Greek islands also threw their lot in with the insurrection, and so the war took on a naval dimension as well. Victories on land were coupled with successes at sea. Most notably, Admiral Kanadis' sinking of the Ottoman flagship off the island of Tenedos on November 10th, 1822. Just as importantly, Greek control of the seas made it impossible for the Porte to relieve its besieged garrisons or to launch a counterattack anywhere but overland from the north. But the crucial question remained open. Could the Greeks translate their military success into a political victory? Next, please. Divisions regarding the political goals of the war existed among the Greek rebel leadership from the start, and the rifts only became deeper and more diverse as Greeks from the diaspora, from the disbanded court of Ali Pasha, and from the Phanariot community of Constantinople arrived in the Peloponnesus. As Douglas Dakin has noted, quote, the indigenous Greek upper classes wanted Ottoman society without the Turks. The military classes, Kapi and Armatoli, wanted to carve out for themselves so many independent satrapies and become miniature Ali Pashas, while the lower orders simply desired to improve their lot, escape taxation, to own and increase the size of their plots, and to move up the social scale. End quote. All parties agreed on a few issues. That political victory in the form of independence required great power intervention was one. Another was that they had yet to face the full might of the Ottoman Empire and that they had to take advantage of the Porte's indecisiveness. A third was that they needed money and arms desperately and quickly. As we have seen, they could not count on Russia. And in the midst of the ongoing political unrest in Portugal, Spain, Piedmont, Naples, and Belgium, the other great powers were equally unsympathetic to the Greek cause. In order to garner the support of the Western powers, the Greek leadership had to declare unilaterally their independence and to promulgate a constitution creating a government, which could then open negotiations with the great powers. All the while, they had to cast their cause not as a national struggle based on liberal principles, which would have won them few supporters in post-Napoleonic Europe, but as a religious conflict of an oppressed Christian population against their Islamic oppressors. Okay, Lord Byron. On January 5th, 1824, Lord Byron arrived and liberated Greece. I picked this picture because I had read that he was a tremendous lover, that he made love to 2,000 women in his lifetime and so on. And he looks very handsome there. So I thought, I'd make the picture big and everything. You could see how charismatic he was on that score, you see. And the important thing to know about him is he was a very rich man, and he gave his own money big time to the Greeks. But most importantly of all, he had influence with the Bank of England, and he got the British Bank to give huge amounts of money to the Greeks. And that was very important because the populace was unarmed, except for these groups that were armed groups by definition. See, but all the peasant farmers were unarmed. According to Islamic law, Ottoman rules, they could carry a blade, but no more than 15 centimeters, 6 inches long. In other words, a man could carry a knife to cut things, cut wood with little pieces of wood or something, but he's not allowed to carry a sword. He's not allowed to have a gun or anything. So the population was truly unarmed, extremely unarmed. And he saw to it that they got armed big time. Okay, we said arrived in liberated Greece. He had been on the scene for some time, residing on the British-controlled Ionian Islands. But his actual arrival on Greek soil was rife with both practical and symbolic importance. The Greek War of Independence touched a chord in Western Europe, imbued with a feeling of romanticism and the burgeoning sense of neoclassicism. Men such as Lord Byron found a noble cause in the Greek struggle against the Ottoman Empire. Philhellenes, as these men and women came to be called, played a critical role in the war. So we see the diaspora Greeks played an important role, but so did the Philhellenes, the lover of Greeks, the lovers of ancient Athens, the lovers of Greek culture. You see the lovers of Homer, Plato, and Aristotle, that sort of thing. Okay, the next one. Military men left without a war since the demise of Napoleon, romantic youths seeking their classical roots, liberal reformers who saw in the Greek struggle a chance to strike a blow for liberty, religious zealots who likened the struggle against the infidel to the Crusades, and other assorted freebooters and misfits rallied to the Greek cause as fundraisers or donors, soldiers and sailors, lobbyists and advocates. The Philhellenes were responsible for raising monies to support the insurgents, bringing the conflict to the attention of the wider world, and for keeping it there until the great powers could be cajoled into intervening. Next. Greece was more than ever in the paternalistic care of Great Britain, France, and Russia. 3 agreements, the Treaty of Adrianople, September 1829, the London Convention, May 1832, and the Treaty of Constantinople, July 1832, vouchsafed once and for all the existence of an independent Greek state by placing it under the protection of the great powers, defined its boundaries, established its systems of government, and determined its first ruler, Otto, son of Ludwig of Bavaria. In 1832, then, Greece came into existence. a pale comparison to the lofty new Byzantium dreamed of by men like Rigas. It was a tiny, foreign-ruled and utterly dependent polity. Nonetheless, for the first time in history, there was a state for the Greek nation. Thank you.
Okay, Stan, thank you very much. Now, it was, I think, very nice and very informative. Well, of course, it needs also for some of the people to know also some other things to add for the huge informative things which Dr. Sfekas brought to us. Now, if you have some questions, please ask. Dina, will you handle this? Your
Sure.
question.
Yeah, if anyone has questions or comments, there's no comments or anything in the chat room.
No.
So maybe people need a chance to comprehend what was said because it was a lot of information. It was really, really great flow of information.
Please present.
Yeah.
Yes, Dr. Lavdas?
Thank you very much for the wonderful presentation. Just a comment, it's not directly a result of what you said, just to have your opinion about something. I have always thought that the choice of words we have used in Greece, the relation of two terms, republic and nation, is unfortunate. Because people say for republic, we use demokratia in Greece. And then what do you use for democracy? So I think it's unfortunate that we did that and we didn't say politia. I think republic should be politia in Greek and demokratia should be democracy. And I think a similar problem exists with nation because many people get shocked when they hear that Greece is a new nation. But it's a very ancient ethnicity, but it's a new nation. And I remember at UCL, there was a fight between a Cypriot student and somebody from the Greek embassy because the guy from the embassy had said that Greeks and Cypriots are two different nations, and the guy got ballistic, the Cypriot guy. And at some point, this is a storm in a teacup because nation is often translated as ethnos, and it's not really the same thing. So just like your comment on that.
I like your question. You're right that the word polity comes from the Greek politia, and Plato's great work, The Republic, you see, should have been translated the polity, because later the word republic was used for representative democracy. They used to say that like the Roman Republic, because they had representatives, it was the embryonic beginning of parliamentary systems and so on. So they called that a republic, and they left the word democracy for direct democracy, what the Athenians had. You're absolutely
Exactly.
right. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, but sometimes you know what, when they are translating, they think that they know both languages and it's enough. No, you have to know how to translate. That's why you see this is a whole special knowledge, special sciences, how to find the matching word. And, this is very important. That's why there are sometimes discrepancies. Anybody else?
Dr. Sfekas, thank you so much. That was fascinating. Can you say a little bit more about how Greece served as a model of a nationalist revolution for whom and how that came about?
Well, the important thing is that politically, in terms of international relations theory and diplomatic maneuverings, the thing that had to be done was that the European royalty had to be the sponsor of the state. That's the only way that the Ottomans would be forced to recognize it, for one thing. And wherever there was a king or queen that's some kind of cousin to the to the British throne and to the other European royals, and then that became an official state. So in a way, that was a crucial part of the strategy. Now, thanks to the Battle of Navarino, the great naval battle where the British fleet, the Russian fleet, British fleet, and French fleet altogether destroyed the Ottoman fleet. From that moment on, they had completely crushed the Ottomans' control of Greece, and they established a kingdom there, and that was it. Hands off. Now this is part of Europe officially. That's what had to be done in the Greek case, and unless that happened, they just never would have made it. You see, so I think that that's really the key to what happened. But it became a model also for. I think in general it was a brilliant campaign, even though it originally it failed on all three levels. There were three strategies. One was the Danubian principalities have the war start in the Balkans, because the governors of these Balkan principalities were Greek princes. They were Panariotes, who were the hospodars. The second theater of war was Constantinople itself. They were going to start riots in Constantinople, right there at the Sultan's doorstep. And then the third theater of war was the Peloponnese, which had a tremendous majority of Greek peoples over only a small Turkish minority of some 45,000 people, most of whom were killed in that war. So the way it worked out was that the Danubian principalities did not rise up, and the Greek project there completely failed. The riots in Constantinople never took place, and then the Milet Bashi, the ethnarch, the ecumenical patriarch, cursed the revolutionaries. He anathematized them, and then that made the people not want to support them. Everything that could go wrong went wrong. Murphy's Law in the extreme. And then in the Peloponnese, they were doing very well, but the Sultan finally used all of his power, and he contacted a vassal of his, the governor of Egypt, and he got him to send an army led by his son Ibrahim Pasha, who was paid off by making him governor of Crete and the promise to be governor of the Peloponnese when he succeeds. And he brought a huge army over as well, and this was synchronized with the Sultan sending 20,000 men across from Thraki, 10,000 of whom would go down the corridor from Ioannina to Arta, and the other 10,000 would go down from Viotia down to Larissa and then Athens and so on. So both coasts were covered, and the Greeks were caught in a vise with the Egyptian army below and the Ottoman army above. And and the Ibrahim Pasha was so savage that he put the whole Peloponnese on fire. It was a scorched earth policy. To give an example, this is a true story. About 5 years ago or something, I was sitting here in Athens, and it was at this time of a little later than this time of year, around May, and all these forest fires started in the Peloponnese, and they're burning so much of it that one of the journalists came on who apparently had read his Greek history, and he said, "Ute Ibrahim Pasas έχει κάψει τόσο πολύ την Πελοπόννησο." You know, so that's how much he remains in the historical memory. You know that they were really up against it, and it was really the winning over the leaders. Winning the diplomatic battle, getting their diplomats to talk the foreign countries into it, and they just intervened full power, the big three. So it's a fascinating story, and the rescue of the Greeks in the end is almost like a deus ex machina. It's it's like these cowboy movies I used to watch as a child, where the cavalry would come in the last scene and save the fort that was being attacked, that sort of thing. So it really makes for exciting military history. But I tried to concentrate on the ideological forces that were involved in inspiring men's minds.
Thank you.
And I want to ask Dr. Sfekas, was just like the question based on your last phrase. I have in my mind that to tell us what was the main cause and the main force for the Greek Revolution. Why Greeks rebelled?
The peasant farmers fighting in the Peloponnese still saw it as a religious war. They were fighting against there was Christianity versus Islam for them. That was their mentality. The intellectuals were really, seeing it as overthrowing the Ottoman Empire and trying to get Hellenism back. Some of them were trying to recreate ancient Athens. The ones who were thinking in terms, or otherwise a kind of version of the Byzantine Empire, but not a theocracy. Although others would have been, the religious ones would have been happy with the theocracy too.
That's right. Anybody else?
And Professor Sfekas, you gave us, of course, a wonderful and very thorough review, I would say, summary of what happened, okay, as you said, for the cause of establishing the Greek Republic. Can you give us what were these primary ideals or values that the Greeks were fighting for as well? Basically for our students who don't know what these values and ideals were.
They were the values of the Enlightenment. It was the French Revolution all over again. The constitutions, the first constitutions that were written were duplicates of the French Revolution. Alexander Mavrokordatos had, in the first Greek Republic that was established during the Civil War, in the period between 1821 and 1831, and he was a president for a while, and he wrote a constitution that was complete duplicate in effect of the French Constitution. So they were really trying. They were totally influenced by the French Revolution.
And if I can add, it was also the time, it's kind of the fashion which they would have with the secret societies, with the time of the ideas of the Enlightenment philosophers, who were calling for, the students they know who were taking some of the classes, the philosophers were calling for the reforms. And some of the Greek Enlightenment, Dr. Sfekas mentioned this, they were following these things. But on the other hand, somehow it brought the revolutions. It brought revolutions in in America, it brought to France, it brought to some other places. And if you speak about Mediterranean, you have to remember also the examples of the development of the secret societies in nowadays Italy, in Spain, in Russia. So it was, you see, like a chain. One would be cooperating with each other, it will be sharing these ideas and how to apply it to their own countries. Do you agree, Dr. Sfekas?
Yes. When people say that it was the ideas of ancient Athens,
Yeah.
Only if you have a philosophy of history in which you understand that the Enlightenment itself, the French intellectuals themselves were influenced by ancient Athens. But then the philosophy that they formed, the revolutionary philosophy, people like Montesquieu and Voltaire and Condorcet and Condillac and Rousseau, and you take them, they have taken the Greek ideas, placed them in a context of human rights, and then that philosophy was reintroduced into Greece by the Greek diaspora intellectuals and liberated Greece. So it was French ideas, but the French ideas had been had absorbed ancient Athens.
So was education one of the main reasons? So was education one of the main cause? And
that's right.
As we can say, superiority in education of Greeks in that they went out of Greece, that there was not existing at that time, and they will have higher education, and they have knowledge about the past, the glorious past of the Greek letters. And I think this was, as you said, the main reason.
Absolutely. These Greek Enlightenment intellectuals, they brought printing presses in. They built schools. They built universities. They brought education to Greece. They were educators. You're absolutely right.
So, and actually, it was the first nation in the Balkans that take this powerful force, and we have the first nation in Balkans free, because we have, I think, on other revolutions, but it was not we didn't form a nation. In this, Greece formed the first nation, and I think after the Ottoman Empire.
It was a kingdom. If you want to be precise, you see, it was really a nation, although it was based on nationalism. But they built out the kingdom. It's slightly different.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, we have time maybe for one final question or comment, and then we should wrap it up.
Can I ask a question, please?
Yes.
Yes, I would like to say first, thank you, Dr. Sfekas, for being a great inspiration for me. I really enjoyed your lecture, and my question is, since Greece is celebrating, 200 years, congratulations to Greece. Where do you see Greece in the future, in the world? How do you see Greece? This is my question.
Well, that's a difficult question. I'm not good at prophecy, but it would be perhaps perhaps first we have to answer the question: how do I see the European Union in the future? Will it fall apart because the British left and others will left, or are we going to continue to have a united Europe? So I think that's the answer. That will answer what happens to Greece.
Good.
Thank you.
So it's a difficult thing. You don't just analyze Greek culture and the Greek mentality. You have to analyze international relations on a global scale.
But we're always in the middle. We are close to the East, and we always wanted to have ties with the West. And we're friends with the East, and we're supported by the West. And at the same time, this is the same thing. This history repeats itself, I think, every time, because we are in between. Yep, I think I see it that way. And this is interesting. It's very interesting.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you.
Okay, Susie, do you want to say something so we can end this?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I would like to say thank you to Dr. Sfekas for his very, very interesting, very well structured, and of course, it was a very intellectually based lecture. Thank you very much, Stan, for everything what you are doing for the Webster, for our students. I would like to see more students, of course, during these lectures, especially the international students who are studying in Greece, and it is important to know the history and what was going on. And it was also one of the reasons why Dina and I were discussing the start of this lecture series. Everybody who is here, please share it with your friends. Those who didn't come, they lost a lot. Well, again, well, it's a wonderful thing. And it was so nice to have this enthusiasm. It was not at all boring. It was not at all stupid things which we sometimes hear during the lectures. Well, thank you everybody for participating in this lecture. And also, well, we can also say that the next lecture will be, Dina will tell us, when we have the next lecture. We have two more lectures in this series with other faculty members who is eager to speak about these things, but everything is connected with the history and with the events which we are celebrating this year. And I think everybody yesterday, if you were watching everything what was going on in Greece, and although we are all locked in our houses and everything, but yesterday was really great celebrations of everything. And everything what Dr. Sfekas told us today, well, goes so closely. It is the explanation. It is everything of what we lived through yesterday. And not only in Greece, but all over the world. Again, small country, as if, well, not the country with the great achievements in technology or in industry and any other things, but this heritage of intellectuality and this respect to these things were also obvious what we saw in other countries. Everything. Today, my students showed what was going in St. Petersburg. Some of the other things were happening all over the world. And it was so nice to see and be proud of the country we live in. Thank you very much, Stan, again, for showing us how everything was developing and how everything was achieved by the people who lived at that period of time. And they did the great thing, and we are benefiting from this. Thank you.
Miss, I'm extremely sorry to interrupt. I just would like to make a comment. Is it possible?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, great. Okay, great. So first of all, I would like to express my gratitude to Dr. Sfekas for this informative and definitely thorough lecture, because it was really interesting to listen in a sense of international issue, because we're here international students. It is very important to dig deeper in a worldwide history. And yes, for instance, yesterday I was looking for one of the main bridges in St. Petersburg, and it was illuminated with a Greek flag. And I don't know, I was pretty sure that a lot of people wasn't even know the reason why it was illuminated with a Greek flag. So it's very vital, I would say. So yes, thank you a lot.
Thank
very
you.
much.
Wonderful. Okay, we're going to wrap this up. Thank you, Dr. Sfekas, for a wonderful presentation today. Bravo, a great beginning for this virtual lecture series. We will be posting on our social media pages about the next upcoming one in April. We will have another one in May, then we'll take a short break for the summer and return again in September, October, November, and December for the rest of the year with our virtual lecture series. So thank you all for attending and have a great day. I'm going to stop the recording now.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Sfekas, for enlightening us.
Thank you.
Thank you.